I'm Claire Mitchell, 32 years old. In my family's eyes, I've always been the shadow Ryan's quiet echo, the daughter who never shined. At the long oak table, my father's toasts and my mother's sighs always belonged to him, while my name was nothing more than a pause in conversation. But shadows carry secrets, and what they never saw, what I never let them see, was the empire I was building in silence. The night they laughed loudest was the night a contract worth millions landed in my inbox. Ever been treated like you were invisible? Hit like if someone ever doubted you, and comment if you've had to prove yourself without their approval. It began that evening in the Mitchell townhouse, under chandeliers and raised glasses, when Ryan's triumph was toasted like royalty, and my silence was mistaken for defeat. The words are mine, not theirs, but I have heard their echoes in every sigh, every proud glance directed toward my brother across the long oak table. Shadows, I suppose, can sometimes obscure what they protect, but tonight, I was expected to melt into the dim corners of the Mitchell townhouse dining room, watching Ryan glow in the center like he was carved from light itself. What no one ever seemed to understand was that shadows often hold their own secrets, and sometimes a sharper brilliance waits just behind. The clinking of crystal glasses reverberated through the dining room, tall windows reflecting the amber Manhattan night. The townhouse smelled of roasted duck and rosemary, Margaret's attempt to fashion a celebratory dinner worthy of Ryan's promotion. Sterling Financial's youngest director, he was only 30, barely older than me, was seated at the head of the table like a prince receiving tribute. My father, Robert, leaned forward, cigar already in hand though dessert had not yet arrived, and beamed with the kind of pride he never wasted on me. "To Ryan," he declared, raising his glass of Bordeaux, the ruby liquid catching the chandelier's glow. "The Mitchell name shines because of you. Sterling couldn't have chosen better." Ryan smirked as if the toast were obvious, a natural confirmation of his brilliance. His tie was loosened just enough to appear effortless, his hair styled with precision that suggested he'd planned this moment as carefully as a campaign. Margaret, my mother, dabbed her lips with a napkin, her voice light, dreamy. "We always knew you'd achieve something grand." I forced a smile, eyes cast on the roasted carrots congealing at the edge of my plate. Not one question about my week, not one word about the hours I had spent wrestling with code until dawn, building something beyond their comprehension. To them, I was an afterthought, a muted presence, a daughter who had traded the safety of the family firm for, what did they call it last time? A digital distraction. Ryan leaned back, swirling his glass. "Claire, still tinkering with that little tech hobby?" His grin was surgical, meant to slice without leaving a visible wound. "Of course," Robert barked a laugh. "She insists it's a startup, but what real career involves pajamas and keyboards in a cramped apartment? One day she'll tire of playing at business." My mother's soft sigh, meant to sound sympathetic, only deepened the cut. "She has always been imaginative. But we're grateful Ryan is focused, practical, steady." Heat burned behind my ribcage. I lowered my fork, afraid my trembling hand might betray me. If only they knew the contracts already drafted, the small but loyal team working nights beside me, the product nearing a pilot launch. But explaining to them was pointless. They never saw value in anything that didn't gleam with old money or corporate prestige. Ryan's eyes narrowed, mischief sparking as he sensed my silence. "Claire spends all day coding in her pajamas, hardly a career." The table erupted in laughter, my father's booming chuckle shaking the decanter, my mother's giggle delicate as glass. I kept my lips pressed tight, not a word, though the urge to snap boiled beneath my skin. Outwardly, I remained the obedient daughter, the quiet sibling. Inside, I felt the words hammering against my skull, begging for release. They were celebrating a mirage, oblivious to the storm I had been nurturing. Ryan raised his glass higher, basking in their attention. "To family," he crowed, "especially the ones who make us look better by comparison." I excused myself before the bile rose too high, stepping into the dim corridor, pressing my palms against the cool wall. Their laughter spilled after me, muffled by heavy wood doors, but it couldn't drown out the voice swelling in my chest. They have no idea what I've built in the shadows. The first time I asked my father for help, he laughed in my face. I can still hear the sound, sharp and dismissive, ricocheting through the Mitchell living room that autumn evening 10 years ago. The rug beneath my shoes was thick, patterned with a design my mother claimed had been imported from Florence, but it might as well have been quicksand swallowing my confidence. The air smelled faintly of polish and cigars, and Robert Mitchell sat in his leather chair like a monarch, one hand resting on the armrest as though ready to dismiss a servant. I was 19 then, jittery with ambition, a stack of notes clutched in my trembling hands. I had drawn diagrams of servers, cost estimates, revenue projections scribbled in margins. It wasn't just a dream, it was a plan. All I needed was $5,000 to expand my equipment, to prove that my small cluster of machines in the dorm basement could scale. 5,000? My father's brows arched high, his lips curling, as if the request were some elaborate joke. Then came the laugh, deep, booming, hollow. Claire, be realistic. You're dabbling, playing games. You think the world rewards this fantasy? The papers in my grip felt suddenly childish, covered in ink that no longer looked like strategy but like doodles from an eager child begging approval. My face flushed hot. It isn't a fantasy, I whispered. It could grow. Grow? He cut me off, his voice rising. Businesses require pedigree, capital, networks. You have none of those. The Mitchell family doesn't bankroll hobbies. He waved a hand, final, sealing the verdict. I remember standing there, unable to move, words tangled in my throat. In the corner of the room, Ryan leaned against the mantelpiece, freshly polished shoes gleaming. He was 17 then, smug even without earning anything yet. He whistled low, shaking his head in mock sympathy. Maybe you should try something smaller, Claire, he said, his grin wolfish. Like baking, at least people pay for cupcakes. Their laughter fathers rolling, Ryan's sharp drove a spike into my ribs. I gathered my notes, pressing the papers to my chest as though they could shield me from their scorn. Later that week, I watched from the same living room window as a gleaming black sedan pulled into the driveway. My father beamed with pride, handing Ryan the keys to his brand new car. It was a gift for landing an unpaid summer internship at a law firm. A car worth more than 3 times the amount I had requested, placed in his hands without hesitation. Ryan revved the engine, grinning wide, while my father clapped him on the shoulder, proclaiming, "Now this is an investment, a son worth rewarding." I stood at the edge of the driveway, my notes still tucked in my bag, realizing no matter how carefully I planned, how passionately I explained, the family coffers would never open for me, not for the daughter who dreamed in code rather than contracts. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of my small room, the glow of my laptop humming in the corner. I realized the truth in the quiet between midnight and dawn. My dreams would never be funded by family approval. If no door opens for me, I'll build my own. They thought I was scrolling social media. I was building one. The glow of my laptop was the only light in the cramped Brooklyn apartment. It painted my walls in pale blue shadows, the kind that made the chipped plaster look like some alien terrain. Most nights, the neighbors argued through paper-thin walls, their voices merging with the constant hum of the radiator and the faint rattle of the subway below. But none of that mattered. My world lived in the whir of my old server, in the endless lines of code stacked across my screen. I'd sit cross-legged on the floor, coffee cooling beside me, eyes burning from hours of debugging. Every keystroke was a rebellion. Every late night commit a statement. I didn't need their permission, or their funds, or their praise. They had laughed at me, dismissed me. But Pixel Pulse, what I was building, was already alive, breathing through millions of tiny connections across the globe. At first, it was just a chat platform for niche communities, a place for misfits and dreamers. But then, suddenly, there were 10 million active users. 10 million strangers living inside the world I had stitched together in a one-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and second-hand furniture. My inbox was flooded with feedback, collaborations, people begging for new features. I worked until my wrists ached, until the keys felt welded to my fingertips, and still, I didn't stop. An email blinked across the top of my screen. Series B funding confirmed. I reread it 3 times, my pulse climbing. Numbers lined the message, investors committing millions, a valuation that no one in my family could even imagine I had conjured from thin air. My hands trembled as I held the screen, as if the glow itself might vanish if I blinked too long. But then, my phone buzzed, dragging me back to the same dismissive world I'd always known. It was my mother's voice, syrupy but sharp around the edges. "Claire, your father wants to know if you can manage the rental property paperwork. You know, since you have so much free time." Free time. The words clung to me like ash. I bit my lip until it stung, glancing at the graphs on my screen, user growth, retention curves, charts that most startup founders would kill for. Yet in their eyes, I was still a girl wasting hours online, a daughter who hadn't proven herself. I muttered a polite yes, because arguing would only confirm their belief that I was petty, fragile. When I hung up, silence pressed heavy in the room. For a moment, my shoulders sagged, the glow of my laptop dimming against the weight of their ignorance. But then I looked again at the email, at the millions pledged to my vision, at the company that had outgrown my tiny apartment, even if I still hadn't told anyone. A fire burned inside me, hotter than the bitterness, stronger than the shadows of doubt they'd thrown at me for years. One day, they'll know exactly who I am. In the Mitchell household, I was the unpaid handyman with a flexible schedule. That was the line my mother used whenever she passed me a clipboard filled with rental complaints. She said it lightly, almost affectionately, as though managing leaky faucets, broken locks, and angry tenants were charming hobbies of mine. I carried the weight of the family's investments, but in their version of the story, Ryan was the golden son, keeping everything afloat. That Saturday, I drove out to the family's brownstone property in Queens. The building sagged with years of neglect, paint peeling, gutters clogged, and the smell of mildew thick in the stairwell. A tenant met me on the landing, waving his hands in frustration about the heat being out for 3 days. I apologized with forced calm, notebook in hand, promising a repair by Monday. When he asked why the landlord couldn't come himself, I swallowed the familiar bitterness. The landlord was my father. The public property manager was my brother. But the one dragging tools and receipts through hallways was always me. By late afternoon, a family meeting had convened at the property. My mother sat stiffly in a folding chair, sipping tea from a thermos as if the mildew didn't bother her. Ryan strolled in with Lauren on his arm sheet in a cream blouse too expensive for this neighborhood, her nails polished like small weapons. Ryan looked around the half-repaired lobby with an air of triumph, as if supervising me was a sign of his maturity. "Everything's running smoothly," he declared, spreading his arms wide. "I make sure the family property is in order." I stared at him, grease on my hands, sweat dampening my collar. He hadn't so much as lifted a wrench, but he wore the mantle of responsibility like a crown. My mother smiled at him with soft pride. Lauren tilted her head toward me, her smirk sharp as glass. "At least Claire is handy with plumbing. Every family needs one, right?" Her tone made it sound like I was the maid who kept their toilets from overflowing. The words slid under my skin, hot and stinging. My chest tightened, my fingers curling against the toolbox. They all chuckled, Ryan's laugh loud, Lauren's delicate, my mother's hesitant but complicit. I stood in the middle of it, every sound hammering into me like a nail. I wanted to shout, to tell them about the millions of users who depended on the platform I had built, about the investors who trusted me with their capital, about the world that was finally listening when my own family never had. But my voice locked in my throat. Years of conditioning had taught me silence was safer than an argument I could never win. So I bent over the broken radiator, the clang of metal covering the burn in my chest. Their laughter rippled behind me, fading into casual chatter about Ryan's career, Lauren's new dress, the upcoming wedding. I could have been invisible. The humiliation burned hotter than the radiator coils. I tightened one bolt, then another, until my knuckles ached. Inside, something coiled tight, ready to snap. "Keep laughing. One day your voices will choke on themselves. Ryan's night of triumph will also become my battlefield." The words rang in my head the moment Ryan announced the gala. It wasn't just another corporate event. It was a coronation, staged at the Waldorf Astoria in December 2023, where every polished smile and champagne flute would cement his image as the family's golden heir. My battlefield wasn't lined with trenches or gunpowder. It was a ballroom under glittering chandeliers. The announcement came over dinner in the townhouse, the kind of forced family meal where every word clinked louder than the silverware. Ryan leaned back, twirling a fork between his fingers, enjoying the weight of the secret before unveiling it. "Sterling's hosting a winter gala. My name's on the invitation, special recognition for the youngest senior VP." His grin stretched, wide and theatrical. He let the silence swell, waiting for applause. My father clapped him on the back, pride radiating like heat. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Lauren kissed his cheek with rehearsed admiration. Then Ryan's gaze slid to me. "Try to dress up, Claire. Don't embarrass me." The laugh that followed was crueler than the words, echoing against the dining room walls. My mother's voice chased after it like a bandage that never quite covered the wound. "Of course you'll come, Claire. We want the whole family there to support Ryan." I wanted to say no, to refuse, to tell them I was too busy managing their endless properties or coding into the night. But their expectation was suffocating, the weight of tradition pressing me into silence. My father's nod sealed it. This wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. That night, I opened the wardrobe in my Brooklyn apartment. My fingers skimmed through hangers of practical clothes, none meant for spectacle. Then I found it the simple green dress I had bought months ago, on impulse. It wasn't extravagant, but when I held it up against my body, the reflection staring back didn't look like a servant or a shadow. It looked like a woman sharpening herself into something unshakable, armor in disguise. I slipped it on, smoothing the fabric over my shoulders. The lines were clean, the color deep, a quiet defiance against the sequined excess of their world. I fastened the clasp at my neck and stared into the mirror. Silent confidence hummed through me, steady and sure. This dress wasn't about outshining anyone. It was about stepping into the light they had tried so hard to deny me. The door creaked open. My father's reflection appeared behind mine, his eyes cold and assessing. "Ryan will shine," he said flatly. "Just don't make us regret bringing you." Even in the family will, my name was barely a footnote. The lawyer's office smelled of leather and dust, the kind of place where lives were reduced to signatures and clauses. The November chill clung to my coat as I sat across from Ryan, who stretched his arm along the back of his chair, as though he owned not just the room, but the air inside it. My father's posture was military straight, my mother's hands folded in her lap like brittle porcelain. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and began to read. As per the draft instructions, the Mitchell estate, including properties, investments, and trusts, shall pass in majority to Mr. Ryan Mitchell. His voice droned with professional neutrality, but every word struck like a gavel. I kept my expression still, though inside I was burning. The numbers on the page tilted wildly. 7 figures, properties in Manhattan, Hamptons, Aspen, all aligning neatly under Ryan's name. And then, my portion, a token. A sum smaller than what Ryan's fiancée probably spent on handbags in a year. Ryan's smirk widened, his fingers drumming against the armrest. He didn't need to say anything. The silence between us was insult enough. My mother broke it anyway. "Claire has never been strong enough to carry the family legacy," she muttered, almost as if she were explaining away a poor grade or a lost competition. Her eyes didn't even meet mine. The lawyer cleared his throat, trying to redirect, but the damage was done. I stared at the will on the table. My name, one line, an afterthought, worth less than the fabric of Ryan's tailored suit. Memories collided with the present. My father laughing in my face when I had asked for help to expand my servers. Ryan receiving a car while I received dismissal. Now, the injustice was formalized, notarized, written in ink meant to last forever. I inhaled slowly, the weight of the betrayal pressing on my lungs but not breaking them. Silence was my weapon in that moment, sharper than any protest. They thought they were burying me in irrelevance. But as my father nodded his approval and Ryan signed with a flourish, I traced the shape of my own name in my mind, not their version. Not the faint ghost scribbled into their document. The one I had already carved into the digital world. The empire they had no idea existed. They think they erased me. They have no idea I've already written my own name in history. Not everyone, Ryan, crushed, forgot the pain. The cafe in Brooklyn was nearly empty that late November evening, its windows fogged with condensation from the bitter wind outside. I wrapped my hands around the chipped ceramic mug, letting the heat seep into my fingers as I studied the man across from me. Michael. His name had startled me when he introduced himself, familiar yet misplaced. I remembered him vaguely from Sterling's holiday parties, a face in the background of photographs where Ryan stood front and center. Tonight, however, Michael looked nothing like the smiling employee who used to nod politely at my parents. His suit was gone, replaced by a worn jacket, his eyes shadowed with something between fatigue and determination. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said, his voice low, as if he were afraid even the hum of the espresso machine might overhear. "I almost didn't," I admitted. Trust wasn't something I had in abundance. Not anymore. "You said it was about Ryan." Michael leaned forward, his expression tightening. "I worked under him at Sterling. For 3 years I watched him climb over people. Promises, lies, cooked numbers. He didn't care what broke, as long as he kept shining." My stomach tightened. It was one thing to know Ryan's arrogance at home, another to hear it mirrored from strangers in the professional world. "And you?" I asked. He gave a bitter laugh. "I was one of the people he broke. When I raised concerns, he made sure I was the one out the door. No recommendation, no severance. Just gone. His eyes flicked to mine. But not everyone forgets. He slid a sealed folder across the table. My fingers hesitated above it, the faint smell of paper and ink escaping as I brushed the edges. What's in it? Proof, Michael said simply. Balance sheets, emails, transaction trails. Ryan falsified Sterling's books, shifted profits, buried losses, all to impress Richard Carter before the big gala. If this leaks, if Sterling's house of cards falls, Ryan will collapse with it. The words hit me like a jolt of electricity. My brother's empire wasn't just fragile, it was fraudulent. I could almost see the cracks in his perfect image, hairline fractures waiting for the right pressure to shatter. But Michael's eyes weren't triumphant. They were haunted. Be careful, Claire. You think you're ready, but once you step into this, there's no turning back. Sterling won't go down quietly. And Ryan, he'll drag you with him if he can. The folder was heavier than its size suggested, my pulse drumming as I clutched it to my chest. The cafe seemed smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of what I held. Do I open it now, risk drowning in secrets I can't yet use? Or do I wait, bide my time, and choose the moment when this evidence can strike with the sharpest edge? My hand trembled slightly as I tucked the folder into my bag. My whisper was barely audible, but it felt like thunder inside my chest. Do I open it now, or wait for the perfect strike? Ryan shone under the lights, but his glow was borrowed. The Sterling Financial Auditorium pulsed with spectacle velvet drapes, golden spotlights, the hum of anticipation vibrating through the marble hall. Rows of journalists adjusted cameras, pens, poised to capture history, as though they were witnessing the coronation of a prince. And in their eyes, they were. Ryan, my brother, the family's heir, Sterling's golden child, stood at the podium in a perfectly tailored suit that reflected the lights like polished armor. Richard Carter's voice boomed over the crowd, dignified and warm. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate Ryan Mitchell, not only a rising star but the very future of Sterling Financial. The applause erupted, a wave of sound that made Ryan's grin grow even sharper. He basked in it, the light sculpting his arrogance into something almost regal. From my seat at the edge of the crowd, I folded my hands tightly in my lap. The smell of champagne, the clicking of heels, the artificial cheer they pressed against me, forcing me into the role of silent observer. My mind, however, kept whispering Michael's warning. The books were falsified. Ryan's triumph was smoke and mirrors, a house of cards built on lies. Ryan glanced toward me, his eyes glittering with something colder than pride. Then, with theatrical flair, he stepped away from the microphone. But what's a star without family? His voice oozed false sincerity. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce my sister Claire Mitchell, our family's resident tech dabbler. The crowd chuckled. Before I could protest, he reached into the audience, his grip firm on my arm as he hauled me onto the stage. My heels caught slightly on the step, the lights blinding as I faced a sea of amused strangers. Unemployed but passionate, Ryan continued, squeezing my shoulder as though we were a united front. She spends all day coding in her pajamas. Maybe someday she'll stumble into a career. His words were dipped in poison, his smile polished for the cameras. The laughter grew. Not cruel, perhaps, but dismissive, exactly the kind of laughter that carves deeper wounds than words. Flashes exploded around me, each click of a camera freezing the moment of my humiliation for eternity. Lauren's smirk sliced through the crowd. At least she's creative, she added sweetly, her voice carrying just enough for the nearest microphones to catch. The cameras pivoted, eager for the angle of the fiancée's clever jab. Heat rose in my face, but beneath it was steel. Let them laugh, I thought. Let them point. Let them mock. They saw only what Ryan wanted them to see, a shadow, a joke, a failure. But I knew what they didn't. The platform I had built in silence, the millions who logged into Pixel Pulse, unaware that its architect now stood humiliated on a stage. The humiliation was sharp, but so was the clarity it brought. Ryan had dragged me into the spotlight to belittle me, but he'd also made a fatal mistake. He had given me the very stage where his empire could collapse. You've handed me the perfect stage to destroy you. I had saved them more times than they ever admitted. The rain tapped gently against the window of my Brooklyn apartment, steady and indifferent, as if the world itself was unaware of the storm that brewed inside me. I leaned back in the worn armchair, a folder heavy on the coffee table in front of me, unopened, daring me. But before I could face it, the memories surged, memories I had kept buried, sacrifices no one had cared enough to remember. It was 2015 when my mother's heart gave out. $60,000 in hospital bills arrived like a death sentence, piled on the kitchen counter while my father muttered about insurance, and Ryan kept checking his phone, planning some sterling client dinner. They argued about selling jewelry, delaying payments, begging the bank for mercy. I said nothing. I simply transferred the money, quietly. No fanfare, no gratitude sought. A month later, Margaret smiled at Ryan and said, "You're such a blessing to this family, always dependable." I swallowed the words I wanted to scream. 2 years later, Robert's business debts strangled him. I found the late notices stuffed into a drawer, red ink bleeding across the paper. He had tried to hide them, prideful as always. I drained my savings, cleared the balance, and watched his relief bloom as though fortune itself had favored him. At dinner, he raised a glass to Ryan's financial acumen. He never even looked at me. And then there was Ryan himself, the brother who stood on glittering stages now, smirking beneath chandeliers. Back in 2018, he called me in the middle of the night, voice hushed and desperate. "Just 10 grand, Claire. It'll get me through until Sterling's bonus hits. You know I'll pay you back." He didn't. I knew he wouldn't even as I wired the money. That cash carried him through his MBA summer program in London, where he collected connections, cocktails, and praise that should have never been his. I pressed my palms against my eyes, the heat of shame rising with the flood of memories. They had always painted him as savior, their chosen son. And I had been the invisible one, stitching their lives together with my silent sacrifices, patching wounds no one else even saw. The phone buzzed, a new message from Margaret. Her words were as sharp as ever. "Ryan has always been the one who saves us. You should be proud to have a brother like him." My chest tightened. Rage, grief, vindication all tangled until they were indistinguishable. My voice cracked in the silence of the apartment. "You never saw me. But I carried all of you." The folder still waited, its seal unbroken. My hands trembled as I reached for it, the paper rasping softly as I peeled it open. Inside, the truth lay in neat rows. Falsified numbers, emails dripping with arrogance, trails of deceit hiding behind Sterling's polished glass facade. Each page was a blade, cutting away the illusion. The fraud was real. My brother's empire was paper thin. His glow was borrowed, just as I had always known. I stared down at the evidence, my pulse quickening, and the storm inside me finally quieted into a deadly focus. The years of silence, of carrying their weight without thanks, had led me here. This was no longer just about vengeance, it was about truth. The folder snapped shut under my hand. Claire opens Michael's folder. At last, fraud evidence stares back. Tomorrow, Ryan believes he will shine. Tomorrow, I decide if I'll burn down his world. The words pulsed inside me as I stood before the mirror. The green dress draped over my frame like armor forged from fabric and defiance. It was simple, elegant, and unassuming, exactly what they expected of me. They would see humility. They would not see the sharpened steel hidden beneath. I smoothed the hem with steady hands, though my heart rattled inside my chest. Tomorrow was no longer just another family spectacle. It was Judgment Day. The night before the gala stretched long and heavy, every tick of the clock pressing the weight of 10 years onto my shoulders. The evidence from Michael's folder lay on the desk, each sheet a blade honed for the strike. Ryan's arrogance, my father's cruelty, my mother's coldness, they had written me out of the story. But tomorrow I would carve myself back in. I turned from the mirror and stared at the papers, their stark lines lit by the glow of my desk lamp. The phone rang, shattering the silence. I almost didn't answer, but something in me urged it. A deep voice filled the line, measured and calm, yet brimming with quiet power. "Claire Mitchell?" "Yes." "This is Mark Jenkins. I've been following Pixel Pulse closely. We'll talk soon tomorrow, in fact. Don't be late." My breath caught. Mark Jenkins, a name whispered with awe in tech circles, was not someone who spoke idly. His timing was uncanny, a sign that the universe had finally turned its gaze toward me. Tomorrow would not just be Ryan's night, it would be mine. Sleep eluded me. I lay awake, rehearsing conversations in my head, envisioning faces contorted by shock, imagining Ryan's smug grin collapsing under the weight of truth. By dawn, I rose with an energy that felt like fire running through my veins. The Waldorf Astoria loomed as I arrived, its marble and chandeliers gleaming with cruel opulence. The lobby buzzed with voices, the clink of glasses, the scent of perfume and ambition. Heads turned when I entered, whispers rippling like an invisible tide. "Is that Ryan's sister? The one he mocks?" Their eyes lingered on the green dress, searching for flaws, blind to the storm hidden beneath its folds. Upstairs, the ballroom glittered with reporters, executives, and sycophants orbiting Ryan as if he were a sun. Lauren clung to his arm, her smile sharp as glass. My parents hovered nearby, beaming with pride, blind to the truth unraveling just beneath their feet. Ryan raised his glass, basking in their admiration. His voice carried across the room, slick with confidence. To the future empire we're building together. The applause roared, empty and deafening. He didn't see me at the edge of the crowd, watching, waiting, holding the silence like a dagger. And then the elevator chimed. Heads turned as the polished steel doors slid open. Mark Jenkins stepped out, tall and commanding, his eyes sweeping the room before locking onto mine. The world seemed to hush in that instant, as if it already sensed the collision about to come. Elevator doors open, Mark Jenkins steps out, locking eyes with Claire. Everyone expected Ryan to own the night. But the light turned, and it landed on me. The ballroom pulsed with gold and glass, chandeliers dripping like constellations caught in crystal. Ryan stood at the center, his navy tuxedo tailored within an inch of vanity, champagne flute raised like a king preparing to christen his reign. My parents hovered just behind him, Margaret glowing with brittle pride, Robert stiff with satisfaction, their eyes drinking in the applause as though it were theirs to command. Lauren clung to Ryan's arm, her sequin dress designed to blind as much as to flatter. And then there was me, standing at the edge of the crowd, the quiet shadow. Except shadows, I reminded myself, can stretch across entire rooms. Ryan's voice lifted above the hum. Tonight, he announced, pausing for effect. We celebrate not just my promotion, but the future Sterling Financial will conquer under leadership that refuses to settle for mediocrity. He smirked, the kind of smirk only a man who thought the universe adored him could wear. My jaw tightened. Every syllable was aimed at diminishing me without ever saying my name. He launched into his toast, weaving boasts into empty promises, praising Richard Carter as his mentor, and painting a picture of Sterling's empire. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, and I wondered how many believed him. I could feel my pulse quicken, not from nerves, but from the certainty that tonight's script was about to be torn apart. A chime rang through the ballroom, the distinct sound of an elevator opening onto marble. Heads turned. Mark Jenkins entered, his presence so commanding that the air itself seemed to rearrange around him. He didn't scan the crowd for Ryan, didn't bow to Richard Carter's corporate weight. His gaze went straight to me. Claire Mitchell, he said, his voice smooth and deliberate, cutting across Ryan's monologue like a blade. The room fell quiet enough for the champagne bubbles to hiss audibly in their flutes. Mark crossed the floor, his stride unhurried, as if he owned not just the gala, but time itself. Ryan faltered mid-toast, the confident rhythm of his speech broken. His knuckles whitened around the stem of his glass. Mark, he stammered with forced brightness, I didn't know you would be joining us tonight. But Mark barely acknowledged him. Instead, he stopped before me, extending his hand with warmth and certainty. It's been far too long, Claire. Congratulations on your incredible work. My fingers wrapped around his, steady despite the roaring in my ears. Whispers erupted instantly, a current of shock coursing through the crowd. Why does Mark Jenkins know her? What work? Claire Mitchell? Richard Carter's smile stiffened, his instincts already reading the shift in gravity. My father's jaw clenched, while my mother's pearls rattled faintly against her glass with her sudden intake of breath. Ryan's eyes darted, searching for footing he no longer had. And then Mark turned, his voice projecting with the calm confidence of a man who understood the spectacle he was creating. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce someone who deserves recognition tonight, far more than most realize. This is Claire Mitchell, founder of Pixel Pulse, the platform, redefining how millions connect every single day. The words slammed into the silence like thunder cracking open the sky. Cameras snapped furiously. Reporters surged forward, questions already forming. Ryan's smile collapsed, his mask cracking in real time under the heat of recognition not meant for him. For years, I had been the unseen daughter, the dismissed sister, the shadow mocked for her little hobby. And now, under the chandeliers of Manhattan's finest ballroom, the truth rang louder than his toast ever could. From the corner of my eye, I saw Lauren's fingers tremble. The champagne flute slipped from her grasp, glass exploding against marble, shards scattering like punctuation marks to the gasp that followed. Lauren drops her champagne flute, shattering silence into shock. The truth I had buried for years now tore through the room like a storm. The chandeliers swayed as if the very air recoiled from what had just been spoken. I felt the weight of hundreds of eyes pressing against me, curiosity mixing with disbelief, the whispers a constant hiss like static beneath the velvet music that had faltered to silence. Ryan stood rigid, his glass still lifted, though the triumphant words he had prepared clung to his throat like thorns. He tried to smile, but the corners of his mouth twitched in betrayal. I stepped forward, my heels clicking against marble louder than his entire toast had been. The spotlight followed without hesitation, as though the universe itself had shifted allegiance. My heart thundered, but my voice came steady, even calm, so calm it sliced sharper than rage. "For years," I said, lifting my chin, "you've all celebrated Ryan as the savior of this family, the one who made us proud, the one who shined. But what none of you knew, what I never told anyone, is that every time he stood tall, it was because I kept him from falling." A ripple moved through the crowd. Lauren's lips parted in disbelief, her hand frozen midair as though grasping at something invisible. My father's brow furrowed, the first crack in his mask of certainty. My mother clutched her pearls again, her gaze darting between me and Ryan like a spectator unsure of which way the fight was turning. "I paid Mother's hospital bill," I continued, my voice steady but each word a hammer blow. $60,000. Quietly, without asking for thanks. "I cleared Father's debt when the bank circled and you pretended not to notice. And when Ryan needed money for his MBA, the program he parades as proof of his brilliance, I wrote the check. I told myself it was family. I told myself it was love." Gasps rippled. A woman near the front covered her mouth. Reporters leaned forward, pens scratching. My father's jaw tightened. My mother blinked rapidly, as if denying reality would erase it. Ryan let out a laugh, brittle, broken, shattering against the weight of the moment. "Claire," he sneered, "you always did have a flair for melodrama. Bills, debts, handouts, it's easy to spin stories. Everyone knows you exaggerate to feel important." The laughter from the crowd was gone now. No applause followed him, only silence, taut and suffocating. I took another step forward, refusing to yield, refusing to let the years of erasure repeat themselves tonight. "Every time you looked successful," I cut him off, my voice ringing with the clarity of steel striking stone. "It was my hands holding you up. You wore the crown, Ryan, but it was forged from my sacrifice. Every shining moment you claimed was built on what I gave and what I lost." The ballroom seemed to exhale, a collective realization dawning, the kind of truth that cannot be unseen once spoken. Lauren's face flushed red, her fingers trembling on the stem of a new glass she had grabbed in desperation. Robert shook his head slowly, as if the weight of what I revealed unsettled the foundation of his convictions. Margaret looked small, shrinking inside her gown, guilt or denial perhaps both etched across her pale features. Richard Carter leaned forward in his chair, his expression darker than I had ever seen. His hand tapped against the table. Slow, deliberate, each beat like a gavel. His eyes shifted from Ryan, squirming in panic, to me, the daughter no one thought worth noticing. "If this is true," Richard murmured, his voice low, but carrying across the room with authority that silenced even the whispers, "Sterling may be standing on lies." The words cracked the night open like lightning splitting a storm. His empire of lies crumbled faster than the glass at his feet. Ryan's champagne flute, shattered in a trembling hand, lay in fragments across the ballroom floor. The delicate crystal seemed to mock him, sharp edges, broken brilliance, impossible to put back together. Around us, the air had gone heavy, the weight of suspicion pressing down with every second of silence. He tried to laugh again, but the sound was too high, too desperate. "She's jealous," he snapped, his finger stabbing in my direction like an accusation could erase the truth. "Pixel Pulse? It's a fad, an app, a toy people will forget in a year. She's spinning fantasies because she can't accept that I'm the one who built something real." The crowd did not move. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward, eager for blood. Reporters' cameras clicked like gunfire, pens scratching with the hunger of vultures. Ryan's words, once golden, fell like rusted coins no one wanted to touch. And then Michael appeared. He had waited, biding his time at the back of the room, but now he moved forward with a calm assurance that sliced through the chaos. He carried a folder, plain and unremarkable, yet heavier than the empire Ryan pretended to own. "Funny?" Michael said, his voice low but carrying. Because real businesses don't need their books cooked to impress the board. He stopped in front of the stage, flipping the folder open, his hand steady as steel. Sterling's ledgers altered. Under your authorization, Ryan. False revenues, fabricated clients, numbers built like a house of cards, ready to fall with a single touch. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The ballroom's grandeur, the chandeliers, the polished marble, the golden drape suddenly felt like the setting for a public execution. Lauren froze, her manicured fingers digging into her clutch until the leather groaned. My father's face drained of color, his shoulders rigid as if he had finally glimpsed the cost of blind loyalty. My mother pressed a trembling hand to her lips, eyes wide, caught between disbelief and shame. Reporters surged forward, voices colliding. Do you have proof? How long has this gone on? Mr. Mitchell? Comment? Michael held the documents high, the paper shaking only from the tension in the air, not from his hand. Ryan's face contorted, his polished mask finally cracking. This is absurd, he shouted, his voice breaking. You think some disgruntled ex-employee, nobody can tear down everything I've built? But the words carried no conviction. He looked small now, cornered, the weight of inevitability crashing down. Richard Carter rose from his seat, his tall frame casting a shadow over Ryan that seemed more damning than any accusation. His voice was colder than marble. You've disgraced Sterling, he said, each word falling like an iron verdict. The board will convene. The ledgers will be audited. An investigation begins now. The cameras flashed again, not for Ryan's triumph, but for his unraveling. He staggered back, sweat beading along his forehead, his mouth opening and closing like a man drowning in a sea he once commanded. His eyes found mine, wide, pleading, desperate. For a flicker of a second, I saw the boy who had once grinned at family dinners, the golden son who never thought the ground beneath him could give way. Claire, he stammered, his voice cracked. You wouldn't. I met his gaze, unflinching. The years of silence, of erasure, of being mocked and discarded had forged me into steel. I let the final blade fall with words sharp enough to end it all. Business is business. The ballroom erupted, half in gasps, half in furious scribbles of journalists documenting the fall of the Mitchell heir. And Ryan's empire, like the glass at his feet, lay in ruins. They had mocked me for years. Now they clinged to me like drowning men. The hotel hallway was quieter than the chaos inside the ballroom, yet the silence here was heavy, suffocating. I could still hear the muffled echo of reporters shouting, cameras flashing like lightning behind the closed doors. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I stepped away from the storm, a strange calm settling over me. The world I had been erased from was now bending under the weight of truths no longer hidden. Then came the sound I never expected, Ryan's voice, stripped of its arrogance, raw with panic. Claire, wait. He stumbled out, his tie loosened, face pale. His hands reached for me like a man sinking in quicksand, desperate for something solid. Don't ruin me completely, please. You've made your point. Don't take it all away. The irony almost made me laugh. All those years when my pleas were dismissed, when I was told to be realistic, when my dreams were treated as inconveniences, now it was him begging for air. My father was next, his voice shaky, the authority I had grown up fearing nowhere in sight. Claire, Robert said, his tone almost gentle, we may have been hard on you, but you've shown us tonight just how capable you are. We're proud. Truly proud. His eyes darted to Ryan, then back to me, and the false sweetness in his tone soured in my ears. It wasn't pride, it was survival. Margaret stepped forward, wringing her hands like she could erase the cruelty of her earlier words. You've always been different, Claire, she whispered. But maybe that was strength all along. Maybe you were the one meant to carry the family legacy. Her smile trembled, desperate, as if the years of dismissals and muttered insults had never happened. I said nothing at first. I simply let the silence stretch, heavy and damning. Their hypocrisy filled the space louder than any confession, and then Lauren's heels clicked sharply against the floor as she emerged. Unlike the others, she carried no mask of humility. Her eyes were knives, her voice dripping venom. Don't let this get to your head, she hissed. You're nothing without Mark Jenkins. Everyone knows it. Without him, you're just a bitter girl with a laptop. I turned to her, the calm in me unshaken. The fury she tried to ignite had burned out long ago, replaced with something sharper. I built my empire line by line of code, I said, my voice cold enough to freeze the air between us, while you lived on lies. I don't need Mark to validate me, and I never needed any of you. Ryan flinched like the words themselves were lashes. Robert shifted uncomfortably, and Margaret's lips parted but no sound came. Lauren narrowed her eyes, but even her venom looked weak against the steel in mine. That was when Michael appeared from the shadows of the corridor. He looked almost spectral in his composure, but his presence grounded me. Without a word at first, he held out another folder thicker than the one before. His gaze locked on mine, steady, resolute. I took it, my fingers brushing the edge of its weight. "What is this?" Michael's voice was low, deliberate. "It's over. Sterling is finished. Every thread of Ryan's fraud leads back to him. By tomorrow, the collapse will be public. He's done." The hallway seemed to contract around us. Ryan staggered back, his face drained of the last fragments of hope. My parents exchanged glances, panic flickering beneath their thin veneer of concern. Lauren's smirk faltered, cracks spreading across her arrogance. For the first time, I felt no need to raise my voice, no need to defend or explain. Their empire had already burned. My silence was enough to let the ashes settle, and in that silence, I stood unmoved. They called me a failure. Tonight, failure became justice. The cold air outside the Waldorf Astoria struck my cheeks like a baptism, sharp and cleansing. Behind me, the ballroom's muffled chaos still bled into the night-raised voices, the shuffle of desperate footsteps, the flash of phones recording the ruins of Ryan Mitchell's carefully constructed empire. But out here, the city breathed differently. December in Manhattan carried the weight of glittering lights and icy winds, and for the first time in years, I inhaled without feeling small. The paparazzi swarmed the steps as I descended, their shouts ricocheting against the stone facade. Flashes went off in bursts, blinding at first, but strangely I welcomed them. For so long I had lived in shadows. Now the spotlight was mine, not stolen, not mocked. Questions flew through the air. "Claire, how long have you known Jenkins? Claire, did you plan this ambush?" But I didn't slow my steps. Their frenzy was proof enough. The story had shifted. Mark Jenkins waited at the curb, his figure tall against the sheen of a black car, unbothered by the chaos around him. When our eyes met, he gave a small nod, a man who recognized not a desperate daughter, but a formidable equal. "Well done," he said simply as I approached. His voice wasn't dripping with pity or astonishment, it carried respect, the one thing my own family had never given me. Michael lingered nearby, quiet, almost invisible amid the reporters. But when our gazes crossed, he gave a subtle gesture of affirmation, reminding me that even betrayed empires left survivors. And sometimes those survivors chose to stand beside you. He didn't need to say a word. The folder in my possession, the truth unleashed, spoke louder than either of us could. Behind me, the sound of familiar voices broke through the swarm. My parents, their dignity shattered, stumbled after Ryan, who no longer resembled the polished golden boy they adored. His tie was crooked, his hair disheveled, sweat shining beneath the harsh lights of cameras. Margaret clutched Robert's arm, her face pale, lips trembling with words that would never undo what they had done. Lauren was nowhere in sight. She had slipped away when the storm turned, leaving Ryan alone to drown in it. And then it happened. The reporters parted for a heartbeat, and Ryan lunged toward me, his voice raw, cracked with disbelief. "Claire, don't do this. Please, you don't understand what you've done." His hands reached out as if he could pull me back into the cage he had built from ridicule and lies. I turned slowly, my green dress catching the city lights like armor forged from fire. The crowd hushed, their cameras poised, waiting. My words needed no rehearsal. They had been burning inside me for years. "You mocked me for years," I said, my voice carrying clean and sharp across the night air. "But tonight, the world mocks you." The reaction was instant gasps, murmurs, the furious scratching of pens against notepads, shutters clicking in rapid fire. Ryan froze, the weight of every lens crushing him, his empire of illusions collapsing not in silence but under the roar of public shame. I didn't wait for his response. There was nothing left worth hearing. Mark extended his hand, opening the car door with a gentleman's precision. I placed one last glance at the ruins behind me. The family that had erased me, the brother who had fed on my silence, the ghosts of every slight I had carried like chains. And then I stepped forward, unshackled. Sliding into the warmth of the car, the leather seat cool against my back, I let the green silk of my dress shimmer under the streetlights. The city outside blurred into streaks of white and gold as the driver pulled away. My reflection in the tinted window, met my eyes no longer the shadow of someone else's story. Business is business. The words fell from my lips like a seal pressed into wax, final and unyielding. And with that, the chapter closed not just on Ryan Mitchell, but on the years I had been written out of my own life. Beneath the glitter of New York's winter lights, the proud empire of deceit finally collapsed, leaving only silence where arrogance once roared. Justice did not arrive easily. It came through years of betrayal, quiet sacrifice, and the courage to expose the truth when the world least expected it. When injustice is met with unwavering resolve, the verdict echoes far beyond one family's downfall, reminding us that no wall of lies can withstand the tide of truth. Like a storm that clears the sky, fairness may come late, but when it arrives, it changes everything. If you felt empowered by this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts. Type 1 if you resonate with Claire's journey, or 2 if you felt the ending left you wanting more.